It is my absolute sacred privilege and pleasure and joy to introduce this next panel, Sankofa, a return and reweaving of practices with land and community. I have the absolute joy of introducing my beloved sister, Tara Marchant. Tara, first and foremost, is an artist, a creative, a storyteller, and a love bug, in my opinion. Absolute love bug. She has worked tirelessly for over 2 decades, with BIPOC and rural communities on climate from a place of empowerment. Working with the Ubuntu Climate Initiative. And for folks who don't know, Ubuntu means I am because we are. I am because we are. Reframing from the old school model of climate, carbon, oil, gas, and reframing the movement into a movement of community, creativity, empowerment through song, ritual, and more. Yes. Tara's also working on her own role as a ceremonialist, a storyteller, and she has a beautiful voice, lots of beautiful voices in this room. Through her own new portal and endeavor, you can find her at ancientbecoming.com, ancientbecoming.com. And I always like to throw in a fun fact about our moderators. So Tara was given the beautiful name Tara, and it was only about 12 years old that she found out that she was actually named after Green Tara, beautiful Tibetan Buddhist goddess. So I'm going to hand it over to Tara.
Thank you, Danny, my beloved sister. Thank you all. I might be doing this because I haven't figured out as I get older how to see you and then read the thing. And I appreciate humor and laughing because that is so much a part of my soul. And instead of introducing each person and what they do, what I want to actually invoke is a presence scene, and then each of us speaking to what we're calling in from who we are, so that you start to learn who these beautiful panelists are through a succession of questions as opposed to just a bio. So I'm going to moderate, but I'm going to show you, reflect that to you, and then they're going to follow up with each of their presentation. So landing in my body, landing in my heart, landing in the seed and grounding to the earth. Recognizing the bones, the minerals, the stories of my ancestors, the waters that I come from, which is the Isles of Hawaii, to the ohana that raised me there, to Bruce Wilson, to Alice Wilson, to my teachers, Verlinda Montoya, to recent ancestors, James Stark. I am grateful to be here now residing in the Pomo Miwok area of Sebastopol. Thank you.
This is on. Hey, everybody. Hi, my name is Deseree Fontenot. I also go by Desi. And I am originally from Taharkah lands in southwest Louisiana. And I want to call in my grandmother, Roja Fontenot, my uncle Jean-Pierre Fontenot, and my uncle Tupi Fontenot, who all taught me about land in various ways. And I primarily grew up in Tongva lands, Pasadena area. And I've been in Chochenyo Ohlone lands the last 15 years. So those are all of the places I call home. And happy to be with you all here.
Greetings, everyone. Hola, my name is Minkah Taharkah, and I am originally from Tongva land as well, Leimert Park, Los Angeles. I currently reside in Tachiyucut, Miwok land in Fresno, Central Valley. And I am calling in my grandma, Lorraine Smith, Murphy Miles Smith, and my great Tia Eulalia Bernard. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. My name is Moretta Mo Browne. I use pronouns they and she, and I am from Virginia, also known as Powhatan land. And I actually made my journey to the Ohlone territory almost 10 years ago. We're getting there. And which I don't know how time sits in your body these days, but mine, when I say that out loud, I just feel so many things running through my body.
I said, wait, we're 20 years soon.
But I will say the ancestors I'm calling into the room right now are my paternal grandfather or maternal grandfather, Melvin D. Fields, who is the person I lead in all of my work. He was the one who taught me how to care for roses, how to appreciate the outside, and just affirmed all of my dreams as a young child who just thought I had the whole entire world ahead of me to explore and dream. And also wanting to call in John Lewis, who is now an ancestor. John Lewis, he is someone who started an organization called Renew Richmond, which was a model of urban farming that I now practice or that I model in Ohlone territory, also known as Berkeley, California.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we are going to the more formal thing of like, who do we represent? Very briefly, because there'll be more questions that will get into a deeper context. But as Danny shared, I currently am an advisor and consultant for the Ubuntu Climate Initiative. And we're actually looking to shift the name from the Ubuntu Climate Initiative to the Ubuntu Commons Initiative because we've been so stuck in the climate conversation and what that means in the policy world. And we want to bring it down to localized, regional, community reflections and commenting. And so I want to pass it on to each of you to share the organization that you currently are representing and the work that they're doing. And I'll just share with Ubuntu, what we are looking for is how do we restore, how do we find from the elders and the youth and the practices of Afro-Indigenous wisdoms what is in our bones that wants to be called for from Mother Earth, from our ancestors for the healing.
Let's see. Okay. I work in Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project. I had a movement crush on MG for years before being with Movement Generation. It's been 7 years. Movement Generation's been around 18 years. And primary role is a political ecological education project. A lot of folks, including myself, came into an intimate understanding of what y'all are calling the polycrisis, the interlocking crisis of social ecological that we are in, with organizers from around the Bay and around different bioregions. So that's the primary work that we do, is bringing folks together to come around a shared North Star of where we're at, how we got here, and where we're going together. And another big piece of what we do, a lot of movement weaving, a lot of different political praxis projects and experiments and seeding alternative institutions over those 18 years for the Commons. And then most recently, we helped rematriate a 43-acre site in the East Bay Hills in partnership with Segorte Land Trust, which is a urban Indigenous women's-led land trust here in the Bay Area. And I played a big role in that work, which I'll talk about later.
The work that I do now, my ancestors, my ladies, they're talking to me, they said, my grandma Lorraine, she taught me how to be a fierce lover. And that is one of the core tenets of the work that I do in many capacities. And Tia Eulalia was a poet and an ambassador from Costa Rica, where my maternal lineage is from, by way of Jamaica. And with that diasporic lens, it's part of what has led me to work with the Butterfly Movement, which works with soil, seed, and soul with Black women and girls across the state and the country, founded by Brandy Mack, who I'm sure many of you may know. And if you don't, you will soon. I'm also the coordinator for the California Farmer Justice Collaborative, which was started in 2017, rooted in addressing equity and justice for BIPOC land stewards and food producers across California. And yes, I'll get into more of that later as well.
Well, they say farmers wear many hats, and so I'll start with the first hat, which is I am a farmer. I currently own and operate a Berkeley Basket CSA, which is a urban farm spread across multiple backyards in Berkeley. And that was originally started as a demonstration garden many moons ago, and it grew out of a policy change for the city of Berkeley that would encourage residents to actually grow food in their backyard to feed their neighbors. And you can imagine, as someone like myself who wants to grow food and give it away for free, to be able to feed my neighbors is such an incredible honor. And it's something that I continue to want to do season after season. And currently, beyond just the CSA, we're trying to get back to our policy roots, which I'll talk about more later. And then I also have the privilege of having an apprenticeship. And I always felt that I don't want to gatekeep this knowledge of farming, that there are so many people we need to feed, and that knowledge shouldn't be hidden behind financial barriers or cultural barriers. And so it's a small, but it's a mighty number. I have 3 apprentices this year, and they teach me something new every time we're together, as much as I give them knowledge about the land. So that is Berkeley Basket.
Thank you, you guys. We have one more little framing question before we start, because we're all coming into this new program, Eco Dharma, and we have different relationships to meditation and Dharma, and I thought it would be really important to actually honor how Dharma and meditation in different forms have influenced us in our life, and then again, we'll get to the Sankofa topic. So I really want to honor Carol Kano in this room, because I started going to meditation at East Bay Meditation Center. It was a place where BIPOC folks could go, and I felt really safe and wonderful to be in that extraordinary group of people and leaders. And I loved meditation, but I couldn't process the Dharma. I would do the meditation, and I would, enjoy being with the people, and it was relaxing with all the incredible things happening in my world. But then one week, Carol invited folks to come into metta through the indigenous wisdom of the Native American teachers. And for some reason, coming through indigenous wisdom lit up me in a fire. And I was like, oh my God, I need to know this. I need to know what that is. And she met the program, totally was lit up, came to Spirit Rock probably 15 years ago, and was introduced to Verlinda Montoya, who is an ancestor, and we did the lodge. And we did the ceremony of fire with the stones and the tears that came through me, the singing. And then I became a Lakota, one of the singers within her Nipi. And it helped me so much in my Dharma, because it allowed me to actually ignite and feel the grief and the pain that I needed to release, to be more in the space, in the room of those who were crying, who were telling their stories, who were remembering, so that when we sat in breath and prayer, I knew what I was actually releasing from my soils. So I want to really honor the Dharma for being such a significant part of my healing.
That storytelling. My journey, so I've bopped in and out of meditation spaces, EBMC being one of them over the years. And for many years, I worked at Pacific School of Religion in queer and LGBT studies and religion and spirituality. And I worked with a lot of Black churches and a lot of spaces, and I ended up doing a program there as well. I taught yoga for some years, but it wasn't until I started farming. I learned to farm from Mo, share that story, that I really had a deep sense of mindfulness through the practice of land tending. And I'm at a place in my life, I got an invitation to come here as a participant before being a panelist. And I'm like, oh, I do want to reweave these practices into my life and find community in them, particularly to weather the shocks and slides we are in this political movement and ecological movement. I know I need it. So I'm here both as a learner and a relearner again, and weaving the parts of my practices that bring me closer to spirit and wholeness, in new ways and old ways.
So I grew up in a household that explored many different spiritual practices and religious teachings and metaphysical contexts for being in this world, and learned that many of them are having just different pathways towards what we often call source. And in that, the land has been my first teacher, in addition to my parents. And that contextually led me to the Dharma, because when my younger sister was in high school, she had some tingling in her fingers. And so we went to the doctor and they were like, oh, it might be neurological and stress, and we're gonna give you some pills. And my parents were like, no. So we ended up going to a Buddhist temple in LA called Dharma Vijaya Buddhist Vihara, under the tutelage of Bhante Wolpola Piyananda. And so since then, that was about in 2014. So it's 11 years that the Dharma teachings have been in my practice. They also supported me as a year after that. That's when I came to Cal Berkeley. And so just recognizing the way that community is deeply embedded in the Dharma, in the practice, that has been a really critical piece of the way that I internalize my mindfulness. I also became a yoga teacher, and dance is my first love, so I have a lot of integration of dance and yoga practice together.
Thinking about something that we chatted about earlier prior to us coming together on the panel was the realization that farming is my spiritual practice, and that my spiritual practice was cultivated alongside how I learned how to farm. Even if we go back 10 plus years, when I was participating in the Renewal Richmond program, all of the folks who were in that program were churches. It was Black churches, to be more specific. It was a Jewish community center. I was already seeing how interfaith organizations, organizations were working together in an interfaith way. And in my young mind, I always thought that those things had to be separate. Mm-hmm. But here we all were coming together to feed people, to give them access to food that they couldn't afford or just couldn't get to. When your nearest grocery store is 30, 60 minutes away, and you have to take the bus to get there, it's easier to go to this place that you go to every Sunday to get yourself fed for the week, get your family fed for the week. And coming to California was the first time, as I'm learning to, as we used to affectionately say, weed carrots and things like that. I also learned what it meant to pour libations. I learned what it meant to call your ancestors into a space. I learned what it meant to put together an altar. I learned what it meant to honor the indigenous peoples that were here living on this land before colonization happened. And so as year after year, as I learned how to hone what it meant to be a farmer, I also was learning how to integrate the spiritual into my work, and often understanding too that isn't welcome in a lot of spaces when you're dealing with corporate capitalist spaces where they're just worried about the bottom line, how many pounds of produce can you produce, that taking a moment to breathe, taking a moment to honor the animal kin that are in your space, that's taking away from time that you could be using to harvest, that you could be using to, make more money. And so I just felt so repulsed by that grind that I just was like, that isn't who I am. So I've constantly been on a journey of finding my people, finding the folks who, like these folks here on this panel, about what does it mean to be in service to your community, and how does that feed into growing your spiritual practice. So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you. So the title of the program is Sankofa, a return and a reweaving of practices with land and community. And in the Ubuntu Climate Initiative, we brought in Sankofa as one of the words. Don't be afraid to go back and fetch it. Don't be afraid to go back and fetch it. And in Indigenous communities, there's many ways that there's a lot of mutuality, and one of those is through the elements of fire, water, air, earth, mineral. And so I want to bring those in because there'll be ways in which I'll frame the conversation, or ways in which we'll see a mutuality through these elements that they may be termed something else, but it's actually the air. It's like when I think of air, it's like policy, it's words that's going out there, and you're forming something, you're telling a story. And so how do you reframe some of these ways that you do practices within an Indigenous framework? And one of the things I want to invite from Desi is Sankofa, to go back and fetch it. We actually met when my organization went to the Penn Center in, is it North or South? South Carolina. And it's from the Gullah Geechees, who are rice farmers. And I'm shared with the person who runs my organization. It's like, she's like, she found out she was Gullah Geechee. And I said, I just found out from my sister that when she would say to my mom, hey, Mom, I don't want potatoes, I want rice. And my mom would say, that's because you're Gullah Geechee. We farmed rice. And I didn't know that. And so we went to the Penn Center, and I learned the history of the Penn Center. And I was like, my ancestors are bringing me here for me to remember what we did. So,
Thanks for sharing that. I just want to bring in the room. So Sankofa comes from the Kan people of Ghana. I like to be specific as I can in where things come from. And the symbol of Sankofa is a bird flying forward while looking backward at an egg, and that egg is like knowledge. And I like to think of it as like we're remembering our way forward, right? A lot of us came to be in this place. We're stolen people on stolen land. And the traditional ecological knowledge that we had was the reason we were stolen people. I took me first, like I said, I did the theory and then the practice on the land-based knowledge, and it's always cyclical, right? But I remember reading all kinds of books. Collective Courage came out, which is about Black cooperative economics. And then Leah Penniman, farmer in upstate New York, started writing, bringing out all this stuff as she was launching her farm projects. Right around the time when I was like on my own journey of like going through woofing and regenerative design courses and permaculture and all these things, and looking for like, where is the story in this? Because we don't learn anything in U.S. history classrooms, so you got to go back and fetch it. That's what it means. And just starting with like the Black agrarian tradition, the Black land-based management practices is inextricable from Black radical political tradition of organizing. Black farmers were the backbone of the civil rights movement. Black farms fed, housed, got people out of jail, moved voting rights places. And the Penn Center was one of 2 places Black and white people could organize in the South in private. So there's a house, Martin Luther King house there that we were at, and just like holding the history of like, oh, this is that phrase, that Malcolm X phrase, land is the basis of all revolution. That's what it means. And then going further back, just looking at my grandmother, I come from 3 generations of sharecroppers in the South. Sharecropping is the system, the continuation of the exploitation and devaluing of the people who grow our food, which continues on today. And she would tell me stories about going to her grandparents' plot of land where they had the rice and potato monoculture, but she would tell me about their subsistence garden and the abundant food system they had, the polycultural system. They had the trees, the tomatoes, the herbs, the strawberries, and her face would light up talking about those gardens. And for me, then I'm going back and I'm reading and I'm understanding, the practices we brought over in holding those subsistence gardens is a deep part of long thousands of years of indigenous knowledge. The permanent agroforestry systems of Afro-Indigenous communities, of indigenous communities around the world is like has blown my mind. And now when we learn about those, it's usually through the rebranding of permaculture. But those are ancient. There's like 26 different ones in Nigeria. Like they're all over the place. And the seeds and stories we brought over. So I think one thing I like to put forward is that we haven't lost our traditional ecological knowledge. We're lost from it. As soon as we put our hands back in the soil, our senses back in the watershed that we are in, our tongues back in the stories, it comes to us again. And that's what Sankofa means to me. That's what it's about.
Give thanks for that context. I used to say that working with the land was so potent and powerful for me because it is my practice, my spiritual practice, like part of my religion. Like it's my reconnection, my relink to that which everything else comes from. And it's the one place that like brings me to my knees consistently, like theoretically and also literally, because I have to, get out there and pull some weeds. I give thanks as well because when I think of Sankofa, the butterfly movement actually has a project called Sankofa Gardens, where we have been building backyard gardens for families in East Oakland in connection with Castlemont High School. And it's been a really important practice because it came out of a mutual aid practice in 2020 in response to a lot of folks just being like, well, hey, like we need to get our hands in the soil. The supply chains are being affected. Like, how do we take back some of our sovereignty? And that is one of the core tenets of our work because, like you mentioned, we have not lost these things. We've been lost from them. We've been disconnected from them. And that has been an intentional design. So this is part of a remembering, a call to remember that this is part of our birthright. This is part of what we have been given, some of the tools that are free for us to utilize if only we allow ourselves that permission. I think that, for me, even being here in the Bay Area is remembering. In 2019, I started an organization called Black Earth Farms with some of my fellow alums from Cal Berkeley, where we basically had started utilizing permaculture, regenerative agriculture principles, traditional ecological knowledge, et cetera, to build guerrilla gardens on the campus because we were like, well, it doesn't make sense that so many students are experiencing food insecurity on this campus, but we're in a place that has so much wealth. And of course, we got in trouble by they were ripping out the gardens. We would go back and plant them again. But we weren't stopping because it is our birthright to eat delicious and healthy food. So we're just going to keep doing it. And we were able to grow food on different plots. So one, the Gill Tract Farm, as well as the Oxford Tract. And we're distributing food to BIPOC families, low cost, no cost CSA program across the East Bay. And that practice rooted me in what it was like to build community around something that we had already been doing, and many communities around the world operate in this cooperative capacity. And oftentimes, our design is very singular, very just focus on what you're doing and don't really look at everything else that's going on. And I'm very much a practitioner of the both and. And to me, that is a huge part of what it means to Sankofa, because I am a complex being by nature of my existence. So it is only right that each of those complexities gets its time in the sun. And even if it takes a little bit more time, it's like, okay, yes, it takes a little bit more time. And I'm honoring that, because without it, then we would remain disconnected. So for me, Sankofa is reconnection. For me, Sankofa is collective works and cooperation and collaboration and all that goodness.
I just want to thank everybody for sharing just now. I don't think I have much more to add, but I will say an experience I had that really kind of opened me up to what the word Sankofa means is the farm school, as we also affectionately called it, had a Black Lives Matter garden that was removed from the farm the year that I attended. And when I say removed, I mean it was separate from the place where we were learning, living with each other. And the first day I stepped foot onto the Black Lives Matter garden with other BIPOC farmers, I immediately started crying. And I had no idea why I was overcome with so much emotion in just this relatively small space. And to think about the elements, thinking about water, but also thinking about fire in that moment. The passion, the anger, the sadness I felt, not only just the story of that garden in particular, about how we had to advocate to get it onto the farm so it could be a place of respite for BIPOC students at UC Santa Cruz, but also just a place for respite for us, for BIPOC farmers who were in this program, who were traveling from very different places and needed a place to commune, to eat, to talk and feel safe. And I had just lost my grandfather and had no place to heal from that. And so it was such a profound moment. And I was like, that is what I would love to cultivate in any sort of practice, farming practice or spiritual practice or both, going forward for anyone, even if it's just, I need to come to the land to put my hands in the soil to cry. And you don't have to talk. We can pull weeds and cry. I do that often because of nettle, but, ow. But also just because there has been so much grief that people are holding these past couple of years, and they don't have any place to put it. But you can put it in the soil, and the soil will hold it. So that is what that means for me.
Yeah. When I think of grief, it's like so much of our cultural learning here is to press it down. And then that goes into our bones, into our minerals, and it's not forgotten, it's passed on. And so part of it is you need to sing it out. You need, to air it out. You need the waters of your tears to come out so that it can be released and then held by the larger embodied world. So these are sort of like jump down gentle because it doesn't have to go in a row if you feel, I was feeling like, okay, we're starting a pattern here. Question I wanted to ask is, what do you want to share? And I'm going to ask several of them. You can speak to them as you feel. How did you come to your farm land tending? Some of you shared that. How did the work begin? What within your program is ripe right now that is really inspiring you and that's lit up? Yeah, what? Yeah. I know, it's like, I wasn't ready. No.
I'll answer what is right for me right now. I am adoring being in this role of mentorship, being in this role of an educator. And I say that because when folks think about apprentices, they might think of young folks just coming out of college, even folks maybe transitioning into college. And I have had the honor of working alongside folks who range from someone who's in her 50s and has a 3-year-old and is married and transitioning out of education, teaching into farming, all the way to someone who's a young 20-something who was just going into college and just wanting to know if farming was right for her. And we speak about intergenerational knowledge, about Sankofa, about looking back at the egg while you're flying forward. And I think really those intergenerational spaces are how we can bring Sankofa into this work. And obviously we're seeing it right now. And I want to continue to cultivate that because when I say I don't want people to feel like they are being pushed away or finding it hard to connect to the land, I am here. I am here to be a person to teach. And whatever you do with that beyond Berkeley Basket is totally fine. I'm going to be here to support it. But I want people to have access to the land, to have access to this knowledge, or if I could be a support in some way to connect you with someone in my community and in my life. That is what I want to be. I want to be this vessel of resource and care and support. And so, and they teach me that all the time. And so I think that's what's right for me right now. And corn. The corn is so ripe right now.
Let's see. How did you come to farm land tending? How did your role begin with this work? What element in your work program is really ripe and inspiring you right now?
Thanks. Okay. Dr. Michael Beckwith and his partner, Ricky Byers Beckwith, I grew up in the Church of Agape and Science of the Mind teachings. And one of the songs that they always sang was about God is the sun, and God is creator all in all. And when I think about just the beautiful way that our spiritual practices are it's part and parcel of the land. So when I first heard this term of eco-dharma, and just thinking about what Ms. Kristen said earlier about if you listen to the land, it speaks the Dharma. And it also reminds me of this verse from the Quran. It says, وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍّ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. Excuse my Arabic, it's not the best, but it translates to the sun travels in its fixed term. That is the design of the Almighty and the All-Knowing. And so I just feel very passionate about the embodiment of our practice. And as a somatic person, I really want to, that's part of my purpose in the world, is to support us getting back to the land. And so I often teach yoga classes and meditation classes in the garden, in the soil. Something that's right for me right now is also my organization, California Farmer Justice Collaborative, is hosting this really multiplicitous summit around the multiple aspects of justice in a rural context. It's called the Rural Justice Summit, and it's about having these conversations of justice and the way that it impacts our rural communities in a very in a very place-based way. We're having it in Merced on purpose because a lot of times we come up to NorCal or down to SoCal, but the valley where the majority of our food that's being provided for all of us to eat is being grown, yet a lot of the folks who are doing that work are forgotten. And so hearkening back to Sankofa, we are remembering them not just in name, but remembering them in practice. And while they're here, we often talk about giving people their flowers while they're around. Yes, we're giving you flowers, giving you a platform to speak your truth, resources to continue your businesses, programs for your children to flourish in, because the act of care it's an act, it's a practice. And it's something that we can feel, it's tactile. And so I think that something that I will take from this space and would like to invite all of us to take from this space is finding ways for each of the theoretical components that live in our minds and just embed them deeper in our hearts and in our gut brains, so that way they can inform our vibrations, because that is also what touches each other without really needing to say anything. It's part of what we feel, is what the earth feels from us. Yes, thank you all for vibrating the way that you are, because I feel that too.
You can speak whatever you want. You don't have to do what I said.
Okay, so I think just to share a little of my land tending journey. So I was a first-year apprentice at the farm where Mo was a second-year apprentice, and learned a lot of what I know about growing food and medicine from Mo. And then after that, after working on some farms, my land tending journey took me into being in deep relationship with Indigenous-led organizations. In the time, Movement Generation was doing this Black Land and Liberation Initiative, and the biggest kind of outcome or sentiment after that was, how do we as Black and Indigenous people weave our land-based movements and organizing work? And it was the same time a lot of folks were coming back from Standing Rock and being told, you need to get in the right relationship with the land that you're on and the people that you're at core with. So one of the projects that came out of that, I helped co-convene with Segorte and an organization called the Cultural Conservancy. I'm sure maybe some folks know the Cultural Conservancy, with a couple different land projects near here and up north, and Sustainable Economies Law Center. And in 2019, we brought together different groups focused on farming justice, housing justice, Indigenous sovereignty and sacred sites, for a land justice convening to be like, what is our 100-year vision that we want to seed for land justice in the Bay Area? Out of these silos, we know what the developer's 100-year vision is. We know what the tech oligarchy vision is for this land, and it's getting darker and darker. So how do we come out of the day-to-day grind and the intensity and of what's on each of our plates to build relationship and trust and see the bigger picture of a land-based movement that we need here and in every bioregion? So that convening led to a lot of seeds and a lot of sprouts. And the project that I'm helping to co-steward and co-govern in the East Bay is one of those sprouts. And along the way, I met a Black forester who was like, I want to do this 900-acre project. I'm like, you do that. And so, but then I'm on the board of that project. So that's how it happens. But in that, through all of those different relationships and teachings, I've come to be doing more wildland management and broader ecological restoration work in partnership with a lot of different people. And that's feeding my soul in terms of what's new and what's alive now. We just did a 6.5-acre prescribed broadcast burn at the end of June, and also got to participate in another 12-acre one with different groups up in the north. And we're in a place where there was I think it was a Bay Nature article. It had just had a great punchline. It was like, California needs to burn, thin, manage, repair 1 million acres a year for the next 10 years to keep up with climate fire resilience. And it's like, there's no one agency, no bottleneck of people to do that. But if you teach 100 people to take care of 1 acre each, what could we do, right? And just that frame of how do we want to be in relationship to the restoration workforce that we need in order to bring down to the level of the local, of the commons, the work that's ahead of us, right? We are often at that 30,000-foot view with the climate crisis, but the view that we need to be in more is right here, and then continuing to connect across the local. So a lot of the work I'm doing now and tending to those local relationships. And that project is really similar to this oak savanna slope and then this more oak woodland slope situation. So I'm walking around here and being like, this is very familiar. In the water and land management practices. And you invoke the elements, and I think a lot of the work we have to do is getting in right relationship with the fire cycle, the water cycle, and the soil cycle here. And I'm grateful for the Indigenous teachers and partners that I have, and I'm continuing to build relationship on what that means here. I think as a Black organizer, it's one of the most refreshing things is to have political projects and movement, like to be able to relate to each other and not in the ways that we tend to only relate to our relationships to whiteness and settler violence in these very siloed ways, but bringing the work of reparations and Indigenous sovereignty together and knowing it's complex and there's many contradictions and there's many lessons.
And there's a little bit of wink from the universe, and it's one of the things about the land, they've just gotten land, is that the very people who got the land originally got it as settlers, and they've had it this entire...
Yeah, it was the last 40 acres of an original Homestead Act, which is,
And they got it. So talk about the irony of the universe.
Yeah. Thank you for pushing that story.
Yeah, I was like,
you're like,
that's the heirs from the...
Yeah, talk about that. But yeah.
So one of the things that I, when I was speaking to all of you, is like each of us have something that is really sort of special and unique in sacred and spirit learning, or something that comes to you in a moment from the land that sort of like tells you you're doing the right thing. So I'm curious, and in your world right now, where is like sacred and the spirituals of the ancestors saying, yeah, you're in the right place. You're filling the well, you're filling the container, you're nurturing the soils, you're putting your nutrients in. What would you like to share about that?
I'll go first since I did the reverse last time. Something I want to share, I think just being in observation practice, which is my main mindfulness practice. I have different sit spots on the land, and learning so much from the relatives there about their patterns and habits, and then learning as we do our regenerative disturbances. Like that's what our species superpower is, that we disturb, and they could be regenerative or they could be destructive. And a lot of the lands that we're coming into relationship with have experienced like 200 plus years of mismanagement, of bad disturbance, of non-thoughtfulness. So it's this hard thing. And they're like, here, okay, you got this land back. Here's all this erosion. Here's this deforestation. Here's this overgrown slope that's never been. Yeah, we messed it up. Here you go. But being able to see the response to opening things up, to limbing and thinning, to stuffing gullies, which is, I like to talk about gully stuffing. If you've never heard of it, there's a lot of places where we put these pipe sheds in, and it's caused a lot of erosion because we want water to go quick, fast away, pipe it, pave it, pollute it. And gully, putting in some of all that carbon that we need to thin and limb, it's like a once in a generation possibility to take some of that and put it back in the soil and water cycle towards slowing, spreading, and sinking that water. Shout out to Brock at OAC, if anyone recognizes that language I just used. But all of those practices are really special to me. And I'll just say a little bit on like, my journey was really about seeing how queer ecology was while farming, and then even more so while doing wildland tending, and just being attended to like the acorn woodpeckers and their wild communist practices every day, and like all the cool stuff that the intersex deers are doing out there, and like it's just like this, like it's so beautiful and magical and complex, and there's just so many different forms of kinship and embodiment and care, and it's not containable in one category for like a moment. It's so beautiful. And I'm really getting to know perennial bunch grasses. Never thought I would be so good at identifying grasses, but I got there. And yeah, the purple needlegrass I'm getting into. 20 feet deep roots, y'all, live 100 years. Wanna do my work to help the purple needlegrass.
Oh.
So 2 things. One thing is since moving to Fresno, I turned my front lawn into a garden. And that has been, as the one Black person on my block, that has been such an experience, a conversation starter, a way of bringing people together, which is a perfect metaphor for me of just how everybody eats. So, and everybody loves beautiful things. We all love butterflies and hummingbirds. And my garden has turned into this wonderful ecosystem that brings a lot of beautiful pollinators, as well as a lot of people who I probably would not really speak to otherwise, to come and be interested and share. And I feel like that's part of what you were saying around like, it does feel like a lot. It feels daunting when you look at it from up here, like, what are we gonna do? But when you root into being in community with each other and recognize how much power and beauty is in each of us, that it's like, oh, it's not actually that hard. Like, it'll take a few generations. That's not that much. Like, yeah, I feel like that is something that, if you want to start a front yard garden, you've been thinking about it, go ahead and do it. I will also say that being a multiplicitous artist has been another piece of my of keeping myself in flux within all the things that we listen to and are privy to. I think that creating altars, spaces, mandalas, finding ways of expression, thank you for your beautiful song, keeping movement practice in my work has been a really important part of like my spiritual practice and also my work in the world, because we aren't just like robots. Like, we are full beings that when we come to work, but I haven't done my meditation, and I don't know if I could be on Zoom for the whole hour. Like, so just having that notion that mindfulness looks like a lot of different things, and like giving ourselves permission. So I started like putting like to-do lists of like my honey-do list, like, ooh, like I gotta make sure I drink my water with my chia seeds, check. Like, having those moments of accountability for myself. Also utilizing the like transformative components of our art practice as well as our sustainable and regenerative practice. I like to make a lot of things out of other things. Something that is also going to be part of the Rural Justice Summit that I spoke on earlier is a trash and passion fashion show competition. Say that 3 times. Where we are, because as a butterfly movement likes to consistently talk about, is like land, food, and art are inextricably interrelated. And so giving this Trash and Passion fashion show competition is a way for youth to turn trash into clothing, into accessories, rethinking the way that we talk about waste, like in a place of so much abundance. How do we reutilize and use our creativity and our imagination in a way that also like slows us down, you know, not always on our phones, not just like giving all our whims to AI, but taking time to, you know, work on those imaginal cells, if you will. And so also just, if we could all just give ourselves a hug, it's a nice hug, just to love on ourselves for a second, because we all are really courageous and brave for being here together today and for the rest of these days. So just a moment of gratitude for all of y'all.
And I'm going to go to another query to you, Mo, which is we were talking, before. It's like we are all in periods of transition. Carol was saying that there was a time when we honored things. We had youth going through their transitions or coming into adulthood or birthing or, portals of death or, and we don't do that. We don't have initiatory honorings anymore. So I'm curious to you, and then we can go back for those who want to add, like what sort of ways are you holding elders, transitions of death, the youth, the moms, anything you want to share about how gardens and lands hold that?
Yeah. I think I can transparently say that I'm struggling with transition right now. Because a lot of the transitions that are happening in the space are what needs to happen, but what I wasn't ready for. And I think that is where a spiritual practice could come in to kind of hold me as I walk through those transitions, right? A recent transition I had shared earlier was that someone who I was very dear with had transitioned to an ancestor last year. And her husband thought it would be good to bring her ashes to the garden. And we planted a rose for her. And I treat that rose as if she is still there with us. I pour libation for her. I gossip with her. She, for me, is still someone who though physically she is not here, she is still living with me in the garden, and I see her every day. And we have multiple plants in that space dedicated to people who have been on that land or who weren't able to reach that land, but we want to continue to honor them. And there are times throughout the day where I am just hustling to get a thing harvested, and I stop and I just say, Kathy, I gotta talk to you later, girl, because this is crazy. And I just keep going. And so, yeah, I think the land, I'm glad to have those spaces on the land. I'm glad that we do have moments with the apprentices where we just stop, we take a breath, we listen. We are in an urban environment, and so we're right next to a busy street. So there's children coming home from school. There's folks who are looking for work who are out. And, we also have to practice vigilance now as we are entering into this very hard time of this immigration scare. Where we have to keep our eyes on our neighbors, but we also are honoring that there's a hawk in the tree, and that hawk has decided, thankfully, to live their life right in front of the garden. And so I say hello to the hawk all of the time, and the crows that live. There's so much that is happening beyond just the people that live on that block. And so for us, it is looking and seeing and listening. I know there's a lot of conversation earlier about what it means to listen to each other, but also listen to animal kin, to listen to our plant neighbors, our plant sisters. And I feel like we do try to practice that when we are together. And I feel like they're appreciative of that, because there are a lot of farming spaces where, like I said, that is not in the schedule for today. But I think for us, for our bodies and for our soul, we need to honor everything that is living in that space. And And so, yeah, I think transition is hard, but it is necessary. And I'm grateful for the land to hold all of us while those things are happening.
Thank you, Mo. What's coming up for me, thinking about the land. So the other big goal of it that I didn't name as explicitly is that it's a movement resilience hub. For a long time, movement generation, we've had our retreats at small different places all around, and the refrain was like, when are y'all going to have a space that's led by y'all, led for us, by us, right? And to bring people to land and for them to be greeted by folks who look like them, roll with them, has already been really transformative. There's some old structures on the land. I'm sure there were a lot of old structures here when this site, it makes me appreciate the generational arc of land projects. But the main event barn has already been a space where folks are doing ceremonial organizing, are having their strategy sessions, are practicing for direct action, are coming together to cry, to be, to just hold each other in a place that is accessible and affordable. And I think that I want to continue to grow that, and how that already feels super important, impactful. And if anyone who's ever been a part of managing land, you know how daunting everything could be and all that could happen. And the gift of hosting folks and folks just being like, this is all that you need if you do nothing else. Thank you for having a space like this for folks to do the work, and that brings it back to Sankofa, right? Yeah.
In terms of transition, and I also think of, like we said, intergenerational spaces. Also, what comes up for me is succession planning, and that's something that I've been working with the African American farmers of California and other elder land tenders and stewards, because there's a lot of young people, like I'm sure we have all, if you've heard of the Beginning Farm Worker and Farmer Training Program through the CDFA, that is a grant that many organizations have been getting to kind of stimulate the younger generations of land stewards to, as I like to call it, make farming sexy again, to get folks interested in land tending in a way that can also be successful, that they can build a business from, and that it's not just tilling the soil and hard work and the trauma that comes from that. And so we have a both end of like, it breaks my heart when I go to farmers markets and hear some folks saying like, I don't want my kids to farm. This is hard work. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And we still, it's an important legacy for us to be able to tend land as a community. And so CFJC has been doing a lot of work to intentionally build authentic and integral, consistent relationships, because at the core of this is building trust within each other. Because we can talk about all the topics and put a bullet point list together of what things are important, but if you don't have that inherent trust within each other, I don't even know what you're saying. So that being like a core piece and a delicate piece, as well as building trust within our other ancestors, our plant ancestors, our animal friends. At the same time, like the butterfly movement has been doing a lot of work with designing for the family dynamic, and not just like the nuclear family sense, but like family as your aunties, uncles, godparents, grandmas, grandbabies. Like, how do we design for the units to come in a space and also talk about these important issues? Because oftentimes, and I know many of us even here might have people at home who we had to leave to be able to come and talk about this work, but this work also directly and intimately is related to them as well. And so I'm like, I love when I'm in a room and a 3-year-old is like screaming in the corner, and I was like, yeah, that's a contribution to the discussion as well. Not only is it like important for their presence, but the energetic presence as well, to get us out of some of the when we monocrop ourselves, that's not like, we don't want to monocrop ourselves. We want more diversity in our spaces. So, yeah.
And as we're coming to a close, we were talking about artistry and creativity, and even when we were just sitting here, like seeing the egret come, or the turkeys come, or the trees speaking to you. I mean, this is the things that we have forgotten, that the sharing that the Mother Earth is calling to tell us through song and story and wonder. And so I would love to close this with a song that came to me, a gift from the acorn tree. We were doing an acorn ceremony up in Mendocino, and we were being held around an oak tree, and the guide was saying, walk around the oak and listen for what wants to be called in. A song might come, a poem. And of course, you don't think you're the one who's going to receive it. I'm like, oh my God, something's coming into me. And so I just want to share this with you. It will ultimately be done in round, but we won't have the time, but I'll share it. It goes, from the ground comes the sound, then we are found. We are from the stars, wherever we are, love surrounds. From the ground comes the sound, then we are found. We are from the stars, wherever we are, love abounds. From the ground comes the sound, and we are found. We are from the stars, wherever we are, love abounds, love surrounds, love abounds. Great thank you to these amazing, new, youthful teachers, elders becoming receivers. Thank you so much. I have with such gratitude to know you, get to know you, and weave with you in the future. Aho, ashe. Thank you.